We are reconvening an open session relative to the issue at hand. No action was taken in closed session. We will move on to budget transfers, Dells of Eau Claire Dump Station. And we have a representative from the Parks Department here, and Chris is here, and I don't know who's going to take the lead relative to providing information that was requested at the last meeting.
Well, Mr. Chair, I'll start. So there were a number of questions regarding the project, and within the packet, there are a whole slew of materials relative to the project, and we have Andy here from Parks, Rec, and Forestry to talk about the project, answering any questions regarding the transfer. Again, this is not an item that would need to go to the full board based on the nature of the transfer. And Chris, if at any point I miss anything, feel free to jump in.
So I don't know that I can answer any question like Lance promised, but I will do my best. I've got a bunch of information. I did watch the meeting from last week with Jamie on, and hopefully can shed a little bit more insight into what's going on at the Dells. So I'm not sure if you want me to lead in with things or if you want to bring your questions back forward to me, and then okay, we can do that. So what, I guess I'll kind of start at the beginning. So we submitted this project, which included a shower building, a dump station, and a well. So this packet has got, it's kind of a package quote that we submitted originally. Didn't go forward with the shower building and weren't sure if we were going to need the well. So we submitted for the dump station, which we understood due to statute. I can't remember exactly. Basically, the statute speaks to the necessity for a dump station if there are more than 20 sites of campground sites. So that's a 28 unit campground, which I'm not sure exactly the year it was constructed, but additional upgrades have happened in the process of the Dells of Eau Claire campground being in place. I know Supervisor Hart had asked the question of, we built it, are we going to maintain it? Speaking to that, it's got 5 restrooms, most of which are new, 1 yet to be replaced. We did an electrical upgrade for $80,600 in 2020. So that electrical upgrade was specific to the campground. So the county has put forth the funds and effort to maintain this at the level that it's at. So what we're looking for is, because of the way we acquired the quote on the dump station itself out of this large request, the funding fell short. It went out to bid 3 times, and by the 3rd time, we finally got 1 bidder. So that's where we stand right now. So it seems to be, I guess, a little more challenging project to get a contractor to even do. So what we're looking for is, this is the entire project, which the original bid was for a tank adjacent the building, and there is no building in this scenario. So what needs to happen is a road needs to get built in order to allow the RV units to pull off the side of the main campground road, which would then port into a tank. And we don't need to drill the well because we can actually tap off the adjacent well and feed those couple towers. So, and any other detailed questions, I'll do my best.
Are there any questions for Adam? Chair Gibbs and then Supervisor Marshall. Andy, I'm sorry. Thank you.
So the question, I know that it was mentioned at the full board meeting that there's an additional, I think there is 60 acres of property acquired out there at the Dells of the Eau Plaine. Is there a future plan, or is the future Parks and Rec plan include expansion of additional camping sites at that area?
Yes, we have had discussions about additional campsites there. So they would mostly be down from the beach area. Would be the most logical location where there's more open area and we could utilize that space. There's also an old building that we refer to as the Hess House that's kind of down towards the end, and that site could be utilized as well. So I guess this dump station would potentially be accommodating additional camping spaces in that park.
But there's not been any design plan at this point, or any number of sites that have been identified as additional potentials for camping there.
That is correct.
And I apologize, you look a lot like my nephew, Adam, sorry.
No
So
worries.
Andy, relative to the up to 300, so we have with this dump station, we'll be able to go up to 300 camps.
Okay,
sites.
yeah, that might be a little bit cloudy. So this dump station is not sized to accommodate 300. This is a tank system, okay? So contrary to a mound system where a mound is sized, and full disclosure, I'm not the expert on this, but I'm going to pretend to be one and give you the information I do have. When you construct a system, it's based on, like, let's say it's a residence, 3-bedroom resident, certain size mound system, certain size tank, right? So this is going to be a tank system. So there's going to be 2 tanks in order to accommodate the wastewater from the camp units. So there is no mound to take that liquid overflow. So these tanks would then have to be emptied. So yes, you could potentially accommodate 300 units. However, your pumping frequency is going to be extremely high.
Supervisor Marshall.
Thank you. You had mentioned a road needs to be built for this dump station. Is that part of a highway department project, or are we seeing the cost in the request right before us?
The cost is included in this request. The road consists of, because of the soil there and the rocky nature of it, the contractor proposed 2 feet of road-based material. 2 feet depth of a breaker rock material, a larger material, and then a foot of road-based material on top in order to allow that traffic flow. It's basically think of it like a pull-off, kind of like the Big O Plain is, where you're going to pull off the main road, you're going to dump, and then you're going to pull back on.
Supervisor Lemmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you have an estimate on the pump frequency and if the fees generated will cover the cost of pumping, hauling, and disposing of that waste?
I'm not very good at math, but I could calculate that number out for you as far as frequency of pumping. But I'd be making some assumptions on how many gallons the unit would be emptying. But as far as cost recovery, that's all factored in. So the intention is to recover cost on this, just like we do at the Big O Plain dump station and the Marathon Park dump station.
Are there any other questions? Supervisor Marshall.
I just had a question for administration that, again, we're spending extra capital, yet we haven't really considered what's the best use of our capital. So would you consider this a top 5 project for the county? Or as you think of the next capital needs projects over?
Well, I haven't, and I'll defer to Chris if he's still up there. But on the capital looking forward, I know Chris and the team have pulled together projects for 25 as we work through the budget. But in terms of 24, from my perspective, the board approved this project and funded it to the extent you thought it was necessary to fund. Turns out there's a shortfall, so we have a $38,000 gap, essentially. I don't have anything on the top of my head that I'm thinking, hey, we need to move forward right away, that wasn't contemplated or funded through the 2024 budget, that I have some other competing need for the 38,000. I will say we budget for some capital expenses within the operating budget, as I know all of you are familiar with. For example, we have a small capital fund for courthouse things that come up of $40,000. And I don't know where the parks are with respect to your small capital list and where you are on that list. If the funding wasn't allocated here, would this rise to the top of that list? I know the Dells is one of the most popular assets we have.
Yep, and I did run the numbers. So we do have a small project budget in our department of $100,000. And where we're at to date, what I could do, I could defer a couple projects, which would free up $22,000 if need be. Now, I guess I look at this as, originally a CIP request, and I would really like to, do those dugouts in the press boxes at Sunnyvale softball. But if that's the direction, of this board, then that's the direction we'll take.
And from the facilities point of view, when we brought the request forward, we go through that filtering process to, based on scoring, based on, regulatory compliance, things like that. And so of the three, when we had contemplated which of the ones made the most sense to us to move forward as part of the process, the dump station was one because you had the public health recommendation and the limiting factor being the dump station if you wanted to continue to see that campsite grow. And so, our campground, I should say. So I think, $38,000, you can apply it any number of ways, but also, I'll just be frank and say, like, generally speaking, in the facilities world, 38,000 doesn't do a lot. So if you're able to tackle something at that price point from our perspective, then that's a positive. But again, the ultimate decision is for you. And I mean, it's true that project was initially approved, and then it was not anticipated that they'd run into the bedrock and have to have an alternative approach. And so if it was a normal project and you had more money to play with, it would be a typical change order of expansion of scope. So it's within the sort of realm of possibilities. It's just you didn't see it going into it. And so on the grand scheme, from our point of view, the dump station having that regulatory piece to it is one of the main reasons that it made sense to push that forward among the three that were in that particular request.
Chair Gibbs.
So the question one of the questions that I had was, we looked at what kind of impact it would have on reservations if we had to change 8 of those camping sites to tent only. And if I'm not mistaken, I had it calculated out that it was around $6,000 of potential loss of revenue. When you take $6,000, when you take that over the life of this dump station, which is much more than 5 years or 6 years. 6 years, you almost recover the full $36,000 additional cost. I know I don't like spending money on top of anything else, but at the same token, we're regulatory compliance requirement, the loss of $6,000 a year revenue, and we know the operational cost is at least planned on being taken out by the additional revenue. I would make a motion to authorize the $38,000 budget transfer to complete the project.
Moved by Chair Gibbs, seconded by Supervisor Lammer. Any discussion on the motion? Supervisor Hart.
And just to drive that point home, with the data that was provided, it looks like a huge majority, almost 80% of the night stays at this park is by camper. So I'm also worried that if we revert 8 sites back to tent, we might start underutilizing this park because people don't want to camp in tents anymore. So that might have a negative impact on future budgets, especially, I made this point last time, that we've made that investment prior to even having ARPA funding, so I'll support that too. Thank you.
The question that I have is relative to transparency and the context, because this was funded through the budget and we specifically delineated projects by funding source for ARPA. And I know that we're proposing to take it from one ARPA-funded project to another. For transparency, should this go to the board?
Legally, it is not required to go to the full board. If you chose to send it to the full board for approval, you could, but it's not legally required.
Any other thoughts on that? the motion is to do it as an internal transfer within the capital expenditure fund, taking it from one ARPA-funded project, the Marathon Park. What? I'm sorry? Right. And Kim points out that it would delay the project until July. So what are your thoughts? Chair Gibbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do understand the transparency, but at the same token, I think the delay creates another because I think there was a timing issue isn't there a time limit on our response to the RFP? That if we waited till July, we might not be able to utilize that same cost?
Let me look quick. This is why I print things. Help me on this. Look at that copy.
Cody?
And I have a thought on that exact idea of sending it to the board or not. I don't know if we have precedence of sending something that's supposed to only go through the committee, but we do set that precedence that then technically I think everything would have to go to the full board, and that's not in the rules as we had it. So that's kind of going outside of the process that we've had set up, the rules that this board did vote on and support when it organized originally.
I think we're ambiguous relative to capital projects versus other transfers would go to the board.
I do not see a date on this estimate. The estimate in the packet was the budgeting estimate for last year, and this is the current one that came off that RFP, and I do not see a date on here as far as which is unique, I guess, in my experience.
So there's not an expiration on the bid?
Doesn't look like it. If I can just, if there is a desire to have us change process, I'll just say that with respect to CIP projects, generally speaking, once they are allocated to the CIP, if one project is under or a couple are under and another over, those funds are utilized for projects. That's very, correct me if I'm wrong, Christy, but that happens very frequently. So if there is something else you want than what you've historically done, please just let us know and we'll try to do our best. But am I saying that accurately?
Chair Gibbs.
Well, based on that information, I stand by my motion, and I wouldn't support sending it to the full board. I understand the question, but at the same token, I think when you look at capital projects, and we have budget overruns historically or under, we don't come back to the board and say, oh, this project came in. A prime example was the under costs in the water project at Marathon County, at the park. We didn't come back and say, well, now we have to roll those funds directly back into the CIP. They automatically go into the CIP. We're coming to this committee to look to utilize some of those under appropriated funds, or they were appropriated but underutilized, and not needed, and move to a project that is needed.
Other thoughts? If not, we'll vote on the motion is made to approve the transfer of funds from one KIP project to another using ARPA funding. All those in favor will signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed, no.
Aye.
That was an aye. I got it. That motion carries unanimously, so we will move on. Now we will go to items for discussion and possible action by the committee to forward to the board, review status and discussion next steps regarding initial resolution for conduit bonding for Bug Tussle. You had requested information from Bug Tussle. There was some, we had Scott Feld from the Government Affairs here to answer any questions, but they did provide 3 years of financials. They did provide a pro forma, and they provided updated maps relative to the tower locations and conduit. And Corp Counsel Pruner has indicated that we have to have a jobs component to the resolution, and we are awaiting bond counsel's language for that. That will be provided tonight. Is that correct?
Not entirely. So
Okay.
between Thursday and, well, when was this? Yesterday, counsel for Bug Tussle on this bonding had reached out and asked if you look at your county board agenda, the highlighted information to be added to the agenda item because it's required by statute when we're doing this type of conduit bonding. I ran that past our bond counsel to ensure that that was correct and looked at the statute myself, and it is in fact correct. So the county board agenda was updated to add that language. There's nothing additional that the resolution here needs to have. This resolution already has the language in it. It was just the agenda title, the agenda item itself that needed the update, and
Okay.
that has happened.
I stand corrected and confused, but. All right, I don't know if I did request from Mitch Olson, who participated in the meeting last week, a updated total project pro forma, which he has agreed to provide to us. We're dealing tonight with the initial resolution. We have the $25 million borrowing, and we've got the $12 million before the county board tonight, and he will be providing that to us. The initial resolution is not binding on the county, but rather a statement of intent to proceed. The ultimate approval will be required with the final resolution, but this is part of the statutory process. So we will have those that information at a later date, hopefully soon, for the county to discuss. And I know that has been a concern based upon discussions with Corp Counsel Pruner of other counties as well. So any questions? Well, we've got Scott here. We've taken the action already to advance this, and it's just providing you with that financial and other information. Chair Gibbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So maybe I'll direct these questions to Scott because I think they're pertinent here. I think initially when we started this project back in 2021, we bonded for $25 million, or the county, I should say Fond du Lac County bonded, of which 25 was allocated to the Marathon County project. But of that 25, how much would, and I don't know that you know the answer, but some of that 25 was able to be utilized for the actual project. Some of it was bond cost, legal costs. Some was required to be set aside for bond payments, interest payments, pre-accrued, or interest while the project was under construction. So how much of that, and I'll get to my point in a little bit, how much of that 25 million was actually able to be utilized in putting in fiber, conduit, purchase of fiber, and construction of towers? Do we have some kind of rough idea?
Yes, Chairman Gibbs. I believe that the total was roughly about 21 million, which was to do the, I believe, 18 towers and the middle mile fiber.
And so that leads me to this next question, and that is when we look at, because there's been discussions about how did the bond amount creep from 8 million initially to 12 million. And I think it lends itself because we've looked at two different funding sources. One funding source was coming directly from the county through potential potential reserves or through ARPA funding, which wouldn't have issuance costs, bond costs, pre-requirement for set aside for funding for interest debt while the project is being completed. And that request initially came in at 8 million, and now our bond request now is up to 12 million. So is the difference part of that requirement that is associated with the cost of issuance of bonds, legal counsel, along with the set aside of those proceeds for the reserve for 2 years worth of interest payments on that, and especially with the interest rates being higher now currently estimated to be higher. So are we down, what is the amount of the 12 million that's actually able to be utilized for the two projects in the additional costs? Understanding that the one project was estimated at 3 million, and then there was 5 million additional costs that are allocated or potentially allocated to the current expansion project, 190 some miles of fiber and 18 towers.
I apologize, Mr. Chair. I do not have that exact dollar amount, but when you were talking about the 5 million going up to the 8, you did an excellent job of explaining that there was more than one project. Also, the buildup that we're doing a different funding source, as well as interest rates, as well as just inflation of materials because of everything going on. So I apologize that I don't have the exact dollar amount from the 8 million, but you are correct when you delineated all those different parts that make up the 12 million. So that was spot on.
All right. Any other questions of Scott Feld or Bug Tussle? All right, we have taken action, so there's no action required, but we wanted to make sure you were aware of it. Consideration of amendment to section 1.51, parent 7 of the Marathon County ordinances regarding conduit borrowing. This is an issue that was before us. Before, we didn't take any action, and Supervisor Lemmer had requested that we revisit the issue in light of the borrowing. So you have the language in front of you, and I think basically it calls for the creation of task forces when we receive the request for conduit borrowing. So we've got a process for review and consideration. Any questions or comments or motions? Supervisor Lemmer.
So are we following the amendment, or can we not follow it because, or
We have not amended our
yes.
policy.
So
we
we are-
do not have, we have the old conduit borrowing policies in place. We do not have this in place. So we follow the policies that are on the books as of today. I'm looking to Corp Counsel Pruner. So you have a proposal before you.
So if we were just to play it out, how would that work with this timeline? It's not even realistic to have a task force and go through that process. Am I right?
I would look to Mike relative to the issue of applicability of any change in the ordinance relative to items that are in the process.
Right. If you were to recommend a change to the ordinance, first of all, it would go to county board in July because it's not on the agenda for tonight. And any changes would apply to future conduit bonding moving forward. It wouldn't apply to anything that's currently in the process and has already started under existing process. So it would apply moving forward.
Chair Gibbs.
Well, I think when we looked at, the recommendations or suggestions that we look at amending 1.517 of our ordinance on conduit bonding, I think there was a lot of things that we would discuss. We discussed what was the criteria, what are the projects, so there's, in essence, I believe there would be two options, and that would, but I really only see one option. One option is that this committee take that change up, but in light of the next item on the agenda, the committee work plan, I think that my recommendation would be that and I don't like creating a task force, but I think somebody that can be focused exclusively on 1.51 parent 7 rather than having to try to take it up at this late after 2 hours and 15 minutes in this current meeting, having a specific item. My recommendation was we create a task force and create a charter to actually look at what the criteria is, what is it that we want to include in that amendment of the 1.51.
So is that a request to postpone pending the development of the task force charter under Chapter 2 of the county ordinance and bring that back at a future meeting to run concurrent with the change in 1.51?
That was my exact motion. You read my mind.
All right, that is a motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Marshall. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. That motion carries. In light of the hour, in the need to ask or act on item 4, I'm going to delay until the next meeting, the committee work plan. We continue. Again, the items that we have are ARPA, sale of and disposition of excess property, tax delinquent property, long-term facilities plan, the TIF changes, cultural competency, 1.51 of the county policies, including fund balance and conduit borrowing, monitoring energy efficiency and efficiency of government operations, procurement policies and processes, benefit design and delivery, including health insurance and child care, dashboards, including vacancy rates, and audit compliance and strategic plan. Those are the items. If you have thought of anything else, please let me know and we'll bring that in at the next meeting. All right, we will then move on to the authorization of self-insurance for workers' compensation. Molly.
Okay, great. And I will be brief. So there's a copy of a resolution in your packet. Just kind of background here, we have been self-insured for workers' compensation since 1972. And we have been before you every 3 years since 2002 for the reauthorization of this. Are there any questions relative to this? I can do my best to answer. But it's outlined pretty clearly in the resolution what we're looking for here. So.
Are there any questions? Chair Gibbs.
So Molly, are we leveraging the county's reserves to cover the workers' compensation rate that we would have if we were not self-insured? Is that a appropriate question, or are we setting aside dollars out of the tax revenue into the self-insured workers' comp fund and then paying claims out of that?
That might be more of a question for Christy, actually.
Yes. No, we have actually, health insurance is a whole different animal, workers' comp. We were actually self-insured and self-administered for years. We have a third-party administrator in the past. One of the other benefits that isn't really there anymore was that when we were self-insured for health, we accepted we had negotiated contracts that allowed us to take those discounts on the workers' comp side. Now, those probably aren't going to be material now, and I believe our third-party administrators using their network for discounts, so we do have those. But we are self-insured and for workers' comp, and currently our analysis of the fund balance of the workers' comp part of the health insurance, the employee benefit insurance fund, has a significant fund balance. And what we do, and we've done it for years, is we take a portion of that, we analyze it, we take the ending fund balance, we pull off the liability because we have a rolling, there's almost a 12-year claim. So we get an actuary amount. We take that claim balance off. We take one times the $550,000 one-time specific loss that would be under us, and that's our kind of undesignated fund balance. And then we take a portion of that and we use it to offset premiums in the year after. And that's been a policy we've had for a very long time. So yes, that's a long answer, and the short was yes.
Any other questions?
Funny part is I understood that.
Any questions for Molly or Christy? If not, a motion would be in order. There's a resolution in your package. Chair Gibbs.
I'll make a motion to reauthorize self-insurance for workman's compensation.
Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Marshall. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of adoption of the motion to reauthorize self-funding for workers' compensation will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Item 7A, audit update.
We have a list, a punch list of things the auditors need, and they have a timeline. We've probably going to have about 10 hours of consultant time this week alone. Our two issues are grants, trying to get them to be working in the application correctly. We've been working with a consultant through CVS. Today, I believe alone, we had almost 3.5 to 4 hours of work with him. We have another session tomorrow, and then we also have a session on working on our cash and investments. We balance it. We've mapped from the old system to the new. What it is mapping issues. Ledgers been moved from 11100 to 11300, 11500. So those are the only things we're doing, is just making sure they're allocated right. We are still working with the timeline that we have in place, which should be that materially all audit work should be done before the end of next Friday. So we're still with that goal in mind, and we are still working on some of the workday issues, and that's really what it is at this point, is just getting through those and trying to make sure we get it all done. But we're putting the resources in place to try to get that done. The consultants have been working with us to get those resolved as well.
Any other comments, questions? If not, I want to just take this opportunity to thank Christy for her 30 years of service. She has been an invaluable asset for the county, working through Kayenta and transitioning to a new system fraught with pitfalls and mapping issues, but it is coming together. But her guidance and her knowledge of the county in the development of the budget is unparalleled, and she has represented the county beyond the borders at numerous state level committees and appointments, and has done a great job for us. And I just want to thank you for your dedication, your commitment, your years of service, and I wish you well in your retirement. And the word volunteer was floated earlier, and you are certainly welcome to come back for the first 75 days as a volunteer, and we can look beyond that.
Thank you. I did start here in the clerk of court's office as an accountant in 1994 in June. Kayenta was brand new that year. I did leave and did work at 2 other counties in my tenure, but came back when the job was open. So I've seen the beginning of one system and the beginning of the next system. So I guess out with the legacy accounting system and out with the legacy of finance director. But you have a really great staff, not only in the finance department, but working with our fiscal staff and all the departments. A lot of really smart people, very creative, and a lot of them have been able to take over with Workday. And it's rough, but it's getting better every day, and we see the light at the end of the tunnel. So I thank you for your support, and I will be happy to leave and sad to leave all at the same time. So thank you.
Chair Gibbs.
Well, on behalf of the chair of the board and worked with Christy over the years, I chaired Finance Committee for several years and worked with Christy in many different capacities, and want to extend my sincere thank you for the dedication and the work that you've provided and the support that you've provided to the county, and wish you well in your next endeavors. But thank you, Christy, for all you've done, and you really did outlive the usefulness of Kayenta, so thank you for that.
All right. Anything else that committee members would like to bring forward for future discussion? I think we've got a pretty full agenda. All right, our next meeting is Wednesday, July 10th at 3 p.m. Next motion would be number 9. Moved by Supervisor Hart, seconded by Supervisor Poole to adjourn. All those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Aye. That motion carries unanimously. Thank you.